The bull was just standing in the road until the prisoner in chains reached out. The brakes screamed, metal groaned, chains clattered as bodies jerked forward in their seats, and the armored prison bus rocked to a sudden halt on the winding road slicing through the high ridges of Hollow Range. Inside, 6 shackled inmates jolted against their restraints, eyes wide, shoulders tense, as if the very mountain had shuddered beneath them. The sudden stop pulled a grunt from one of the men, Cruz, the youngest of the lot, who had slammed his knee against the steel partition. What the heck? Officer Schroeder, the lead transport guard, was already on his feet, rifle unhooked from its wall mount. His voice was sharp, annoyed, but not panicked. Not yet. Outside the windshield, silent and unmoving in the center of the 2-lane mountain road, stood a massive bull, jet black, solid muscle, its head lowered, not in grazing but in deliberate defiance. No movement, no twitch. Its eyes stared straight at the bus. Brant Culver didn't speak at first. He didn't shift or blink. While the others muttered and leaned to see what had stopped them, Brant only watched. Shackled at the wrists and waist like the rest, his knuckles white where his fists were clenched, he leaned forward as far as the chain across his chest allowed. Then he exhaled. "Don't spook it," he said, his voice low but certain, cutting through the rising noise like a knife. Officer Schroeder froze mid-step. He turned slowly toward Brant, his glare a mixture of irritation and suspicion. "You're a felon, not a wildlife expert," he said, motioning to the side door for his fellow guard to get out and investigate. Brant didn't look at him. He kept his eyes on the bull, which still hadn't moved. Its tail flicked once, just once. "You spook a bull that size," Brant murmured. "People die." "What did you say?" The other inmate beside him, Ralph Denning, asked, his voice tight. Brant ignored him. The second guard, a younger man named Officer Klein, opened the bus's side door with a loud hydraulic hiss and stepped out, boots crunching the gravel at the road's shoulder. The sharp mountain air flooded into the cabin, carrying pine, dust, and something deeper, earthy, thick, alive. "Get back inside," Brant said suddenly, louder now, urgency in his tone. Klein paused, looked over his shoulder. "Are you threatening me?" "No," Brant said, eyes never leaving the animal. "I'm warning you." The bull shifted. With one slow step forward, its hooves cracked the silence. Another step. The ground vibrated beneath it. Its breathing became audible now, snorting through wide, flaring nostrils. And then, the bull charged. It happened in a single breath. The massive beast threw its weight forward, hooves thundering as it barreled straight into the front of the prison bus. Glass shattered. Metal crumpled. The front grille collapsed like paper as the vehicle rocked backward from the force of the impact. Officer Schroeder cursed and raised his rifle. Prisoners shouted, ducking down. Klein screamed from outside as he was thrown clear, tumbling across the asphalt and slamming into the metal guardrail. "Hold your fire!" Brant shouted, rising as far as the chains allowed. Schroeder didn't listen. He fired a shot over the bull's head. The sound echoed like thunder between the cliffs. The bull reeled back, then let out a deep guttural bellow, half rage, half challenge. It was no longer calm. It was furious. Brant twisted his torso toward the window, ignoring the bite of the restraints around his ribs. He turned the side of his body and pressed the chain against a narrow steel bar near the broken emergency latch. "Culver, what are you doing?" Denning shouted beside him, struggling in his own restraints. The bus leaned slightly from the damaged front end. A piece of the cracked window above Brant had fractured into a spiderweb. He wrapped his cuffed wrist around the bar, twisted, then yanked hard. The metal resisted. He yanked again. A snap. The bolt broke loose and one side of his chain pulled free. He didn't hesitate. He moved to the window, peering through the busted glass. The bull was now pacing in a slow circle, snorting heavily, eyes trained on the front of the vehicle. It wasn't rampaging. It was waiting again. Brant reached his free hand out through the opening, slow, deliberate, palm out, fingers spread. "Hey, boy," he whispered, voice low, almost like a prayer. "You remember me, don't you?" Behind him, the other inmates had fallen silent. The kind of silence that happens when something unbelievable starts to take shape. The air outside was still, the kind of stillness just before lightning strikes. The bull stopped, one hoof forward, snort, another hoof. It moved toward Brant's hand, slow now, deliberate, step by step. Schroeder, rifle raised again, saw the movement and panicked. "Get your hand inside! I said get back!" He lifted the gun to his shoulder, but the bull didn't even glance at him. It turned its head away from the rifle and stepped toward Brant's hand. Brant didn't flinch. His arm was outstretched, steady. The bull's nose brushed his palm. The touch was gentle, familiar. The massive head leaned into the contact like a dog greeting its master after years apart. A gust of wind cut through the trees above, scattering pine needles across the road. Brant closed his eyes briefly, whispering, That's it, boy. That's it. Inside the bus, every man held his breath. Even Schroeder lowered the rifle slightly, uncertain, blinking as if trying to convince himself he wasn't seeing what he was seeing. The guard on the floor groaned again, clutching his ribs where he'd hit the seat during the collision. Brant opened his eyes and met the bull's dark gaze. "You're not here by accident," he murmured, his voice so low it nearly disappeared into the wind. "Are you?" The bull didn't answer. Of course it didn't. But it didn't need to. The connection was there, deep and real. And that's when Brant knew. This wasn't just a lucky moment. It wasn't a fluke or coincidence. Someone had sent the bull. Someone knew he was being transported today. And someone was trying to reach him. A chill crawled down his back, even as the bull rested its head against his arm. Schroeder took one step closer, boots crunching glass, his voice hoarse. "You know this animal?" Brant nodded once, his gaze locked on the creature in front of him. "His name is Ransom." Schroeder's eyes widened slightly. "That bull? He was supposed to be dead." Brant didn't look at him. "Not dead. Stolen." "By who?" Brant didn't answer. Not yet. His thoughts were already racing ahead, faster than the words could follow. He reached out with his other hand, still cuffed to the chain, and slowly touched the bull's forehead. "Who sent you, boy?" he whispered, barely audible. Ransom's ears flicked. His muscles were tense but not aggressive. His breathing was steady now, deep. He wasn't afraid. He was waiting. And Brant, even through the haze of confusion and disbelief, understood one thing with certainty. Whatever was coming next, it wasn't over. Not even close. And then, as the moment stretched impossibly thin, and the last echoes of gunfire faded down the valley, the bull took one more step forward. Schroeder raised his weapon again, but the bull turned from the gun and stepped toward Brant's hand. The air thickened around the shattered prison transport, heavy with silence and dust. A breeze drifted down from the surrounding ridges, stirring the scent of pine and engine coolant. But no one moved. No one spoke. The injured guard on the roadside groaned, clutching his ribs, but even that sound seemed far away, drowned by the sight in front of them. The bull stood inches from Brant Culver's outstretched hand, its breath rising in hot clouds into the cool mountain air. Brant's fingers trembled slightly, not from fear but something deeper. Memory, recognition, loss. "I trained this bull," he said, just loud enough for the others to hear. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The weight of it cut through the tension like a blade. From inside the bus, Denning leaned forward as far as his restraints allowed, peering through the cracked glass. His brow furrowed. "You're saying, that's your bull?" Brant nodded once, eyes never leaving the creature before him. 10 years ago. His name's Ransom." Officer Schroeder, still holding the rifle in a rigid grip, scoffed. But the sound lacked conviction. He took a half step backward, the toe of his boot scraping glass. "You expect me to believe that?" he said, trying to sound firm. "You think it's a coincidence a retired rodeo bull shows up in the middle of nowhere, blocking this bus?" Brant didn't flinch. His arm remained steady, his gaze locked with the bull's. Ransom never forgot a face, not one. The bull's massive body moved an inch closer. Its dark eyes, rimmed with gold and deep as a canyon, didn't blink. Then, in a single, deliberate motion, it lowered its head and brushed its nose against Brant's open palm. The touch was gentle, familiar. It wasn't a test or a challenge. It was trust. A sound escaped one of the inmates behind Brant, half laughter, half disbelief, nervous and cracked. The others sat frozen, unsure whether to be amazed or afraid. Schroeder lowered the rifle just slightly, his stance uncertain now. He wasn't used to this, wasn't trained for bulls that listened better than people. But not everyone was standing still. Officer Klein, who had been trying to pull himself together near the rear of the bus, suddenly pushed to his feet. His hand went for the radio clipped to his belt. "I'll call it in," he muttered, limping toward the rear tire. "We need backup." His foot hit a patch of loose gravel. He slipped. A loud pop echoed as his knee twisted unnaturally, and he collapsed with a sharp yell, crumpling beside the roadside brush. The radio tumbled from his grip, bouncing once before falling silent in the dirt. Brant didn't look back. He didn't move. "He followed the bus," he said, his tone quiet but absolute. "He tracked me here." Schroeder's face darkened. His grip on the rifle tightened again. "Even if this freak show's real, you're still a prisoner. Get your hand back inside." But Ransom huffed, a sound of disapproval, and took a step between Brant and the bus, blocking the open door like a guardian. Brant took that moment. With slow, controlled movements, he stepped out through the broken side panel of the vehicle. His broken chain dragged behind him like a leash, clinking faintly with every step. The mountain wind tugged at his orange prison shirt. No one tried to stop him. Even Schroeder didn't raise his rifle this time. Ransom stepped back, just enough to give Brandt space. The two of them stood side by side, man and beast, as if no time had passed at all. "We gotta go," Brandt said, turning slightly toward the guards still inside. "You don't understand what's coming." "What are you talking about?" Schroeder barked, his voice sharper now, not because he was in control, but because he wasn't. "An ambush," Brandt answered, firm and clear. "The route was leaked." Schroeder blinked. "Leaked to who?" Brandt turned his head slowly. "You think this is about a bull? This is about the man who owns him now." Schroeder stepped out onto the gravel, boots crunching. His eyes narrowed. "Ransom was auctioned off. Government asset. We got papers." Brandt's lips pressed into a tight line. "He was stolen," he said, "by a man named Jarrell Kane." The name hit like a gunshot. Even Denning, still shackled inside, flinched at the sound. Schroeder froze. "Kane?" he echoed. "You're serious?" Brandt nodded. "You know the name." Everyone in law enforcement did. Jarrell Kane, former defense contractor turned outlaw rancher. He once owned 12,000 acres along the Nevada border, built a private militia under the guise of livestock security, and disappeared just before the feds could indict him for illegal weapons trade. His name had been tied to disappearances, unexplained raids, and mysterious accidents for years. Nothing ever stuck. "He used to own me too," Brandt said quietly. "Before the rodeo, before the charges." Schroeder took a cautious step toward him. "And you think this, all of this, is Kane?" "I know it is." Schroeder clenched his jaw. "Why would Kane care about one convict on a transport route?" Brandt looked him dead in the eye. "Because I know where he buried the evidence. And because Ransom isn't just a bull, he's a message." Schroeder's mouth opened, but he didn't get the chance to speak. Crack. A single high-velocity round slammed into the side mirror of the bus, shattering the glass in an instant. Everyone ducked. Brandt shoved himself against the bull's side, using the animal as cover. Schroeder dropped to a crouch and swung his rifle toward the ridgeline above the road. The silence was gone. The mountain was awake. More than awake. It was watching. Inside the bus, the prisoners were yelling, ducking below the windows, chains rattling against metal. Klein, still on the ground, tried to crawl back toward the front bumper, one leg dragging uselessly behind him. Another shot rang out, closer this time. It struck the dirt beside the rear tire, spraying gravel. "They've got eyes on us," Brandt said, crouching low beside Ransom. "High ground. Probably 3 shooters, maybe more." Schroeder looked toward the bus, toward the ridges, then back at Brandt. "How do you know that?" "Because this was meant to look like an accident. But Ransom showing up early spooked their plan." Brandt nodded toward the trees. "They're adjusting now, but they're still coming." Schroeder looked at the shattered side mirror, his jaw clenched so tight it trembled. "This ain't a rescue," Brandt said. His voice was cold. "It's a trap, for all of us." That was when the third sniper round clipped the top edge of the bus roof and sent sparks flying. Gunfire erupted from the ridgeline. Bullets shattered the windshield of the transport bus, sending glass and screams flying in all directions. Schroeder dropped instantly, his instincts kicking in as he grabbed the wounded guard Klein and dragged him behind a wheel well, shielding them from the line of fire. Dust and rock exploded in sprays around them. Prisoners inside the bus dove to the floor, some praying, some shouting, but not Brandt Culver. He didn't flinch. Brandt's chains were still broken from the earlier bull incident, the snapped links trailing from his waist like iron vines. His wrists were cut, blood mixing with dust, but his eyes burned with a terrifying calm. He glanced at the ridgeline, then down at the incline on the west side, narrow, overgrown, but passable. "They're flanking," Brandt muttered. Next to him, Ransom the bull snorted low, sensing the threat. The animal's hooves pounded once against the earth, ready. Beside Brandt, the youngest prisoner, Devin, stared with wide, terrified eyes. "They'll box us in from above," Brandt said, now louder, his voice slicing through the chaos. "We have one shot." Schroeder looked up from his crouch, his jaw clenched tight. "What, you're suddenly our savior?" Brandt didn't blink. "You want your men to live? Then listen." Another shot cracked overhead, shaving bark from a nearby tree. One of the other prisoners screamed, hit in the leg. Brandt knelt low beside Schroeder. "I need 2 things, your trust and the keys." Klein coughed, face pale as ash, blood soaking through the side of his uniform. He looked to Schroeder, then back at Brandt, and gave a weak nod. "We don't have time," Brandt said, his voice tight. "They're not here for a rescue. They're here to clean up, to make sure no one talks." Schroeder hesitated, but only for a second. The steel ring of the keys hit Brandt's palm a moment later. Brandt stood, unlocked his shackles completely, then tossed the keys to Devin to help the others. He rolled his shoulders, then tightened the old broken chain around his fist like a whip. He turned to Ransom. "You ready, boy?" The bull snorted again and pawed the dirt. Brant looked to Schroeder. "You take the west slope. It's steep, but there's a dry riverbed at the bottom. There's a service trail just past the tree line. They won't expect you to double back. Keep your head low. Move fast." Schroeder didn't argue. He barked orders to the remaining guards and unshackled prisoners, guiding them toward the western edge of the wreck site. Brant grabbed Devon's shoulder. "Tell them to stay low. Use the terrain. If they reach the riverbed, they might live." Devon nodded shakily, his hands trembling as he helped another prisoner up. Gunfire intensified as Brant and Ransom moved toward the east side, deliberately drawing attention. Brant's silhouette darted between boulders and shrubs, leaping over a log, keeping his posture wide, visible. Shots followed them like hounds. "They're falling for it!" Schroeder hissed, pushing Klein ahead through the undergrowth. Brant felt the sting of a grazing bullet zip past his shoulder but didn't stop. Ransom charged beside him, impossibly fast for his bulk. The ground shook under the bull's hooves. Together they raced deeper into the fire zone, buying precious seconds. Behind them, Schroeder and the others disappeared into the underbrush. Brant ducked behind a boulder as two more shots slammed into a tree above. He could hear the men yelling, angry, confused. He pulled himself over a low ridge and grabbed a fist-sized stone. His breath was ragged now. The heat bore down on him, but his grip was steady. Then he saw one of the ambushers. A tall man in desert fatigues crouched just beyond a stump, rifle raised, scanning the west, watching the wrong side. Brant didn't wait. He lunged forward, slamming the rock into the side of the man's skull. The attacker collapsed with a grunt, dropping his weapon. Brant seized the man's radio, ducked back into cover, and twisted the volume knob. Static, then a voice crackled through. "Where's Culver?" "He's the only one that matters," said a voice, sharp, smug, familiar. Brant's blood went cold. He hadn't heard that voice in years. "I want Culver alive," the voice repeated. Brant stared at the radio. "Kane," he whispered. That name still haunted him. The man who'd betrayed him. The man who'd made him a prisoner. He clicked the radio off. "That's your mistake, Kane," Brant muttered, his voice low, eyes hard. Ransom stepped beside him, snorting. Brant stood slowly. "Time to end this." He reached down and tore a strip of fabric from the dead man's shirt, tying it around his injured hand. Then he turned, eyes locking on the faint trail that led uphill, toward Kane's hidden camp. But as they moved, silent as hunters, the weight of something unseen followed. High above, a drone's eye locked onto the bull's movement. Kane watched from a monitor deep in the hills, a half smile on his lips. "You always thought you were in control," he whispered to no one. "But I trained that beast, Brant, marked him, tracked him, and now you're walking right into my hands." The signal pulsed on the screen, a slow blink. Ransom's internal tracker, embedded beneath the bull's shoulder months ago, when Kane had first sent the animal into the wild. Not just bait, the map. And Brant was following it straight to the trap. He turned to Ransom. "Time to end this." The air trembled with the sound of hooves and shouts. Dust whipped around Brant's face as he stood his ground, chains dangling from his wrists, his body scraped and bruised but unbent. Kane's men had finally found them. 6 trucks fanned out across the ridge, headlights blazing, assault rifles aimed. And yet, neither Brant nor the bull beside him moved. Ransom stood like a statue of raw muscle and fury, his chest heaving, eyes fixed forward, flanks trembling from the pain of the tracker still embedded deep under his hide. "Back away from the animal," one of the militia yelled through a loudspeaker, voice sharp and shaking. "This is your final warning." But Brant didn't budge. He took one slow step forward, raising his hands to show he was unarmed. The bull's breath steamed in the cold air, one hoof stomping in the dirt, as if answering a call that only the two of them could hear. Behind them, the cliffs rose tall and shadowed, and below, the dried-up riverbed snaked like a scar across the land. Kane emerged last, smirking, confident, walking like a man who thought he owned the world. He held a small remote in his left hand, thumb poised above a button. "You think this ends with you standing tall, Brant?" he sneered, stopping a dozen paces away. "You don't control that animal. I do. I always have." Brant's eyes didn't leave him. "Then why is he still standing beside me?" For a moment, silence. Then Kane's thumb jabbed the button. Ransom reared back, bellowing in pain. The device had triggered the tracker, sending sharp pulses through the bull's body like electric fire. Brant lunged toward him, but Kane laughed. "See? Even now he's mine." Brant moved fast, too fast for a man with chains dragging from his arms. He slipped a knife from the sleeve of his shirt, a blade he had hidden even through the transport shackles. Ransom's front legs buckled, but Brant was already under his shoulder, gripping the slick, blood-crusted flesh where he'd felt the lump days ago. The tracker. It was buried deep, surrounded by swelling and heat. The knife bit in, and Ransom howled, the sound shaking the militiamen enough that a few actually lowered their weapons. Kane's smirk faded. "You're going to kill him," he shouted. "No," Brant growled, his hands slick with blood. "I'm freeing him." The blade found metal. Brant pried it loose in one harsh jerk. The small black device clattered to the ground. For half a second, everything stood still. Then Ransom lifted his head and charged. Kane turned and ran, panic overtaking pride. The bull tore after him like thunder on legs, no longer bound, no longer shackled by Kane's remote or by fear. Kane reached the riverbed just as his ankle twisted in the rocks. He screamed, scrambling. But Ransom was already upon him. The bull didn't hesitate. With a roar and a mighty swing of his horns, he crushed Kane's escape with the full weight of justice. Not a wild rage, but a cold, righteous fury. Kane's last words came in a wheeze, stunned and bitter. "How did you—" Brant stood over him, expression unreadable. He never answered. Behind him, sirens howled across the range. The real backup had come. A joint task force of state and federal agents spilled out of dark SUVs and armored jeeps, their rifles raised, not at Brant, but at the stunned remnants of Kane's militia, who dropped their weapons one by one. Someone yelled, "Clear!" Another shouted, "We've got movement by the cliffs!" But Brant didn't move. He stood beside Ransom, hand resting lightly on the bull's shoulder. One of the guards who had once ridden with Kane's crew, Officer Merrick, approached slowly, his face pale with guilt and awe. "We found the radio logs," he said, voice quiet. "Everything you said back in the transport. It checks out. We heard it all. The camps, the raids, the forced fights. We found the cages, Brant." Brant nodded once. There was no victory in his eyes, only a tired sorrow. Weeks later, the courtroom was quiet. Brant sat alone at the defense table as charges were read aloud for the final time. But this time, things were different. The prosecution stepped back. The judge, an older man with silver hair and a slow voice, read the ruling carefully. Based on new evidence, the defendant is hereby cleared of all prior charges. The state acknowledges the miscarriage of justice and issues a full pardon. Applause didn't follow, just silence, heavy, respectful. Afterward, someone from the Department of Animal Affairs approached Brant with a business card and a government offer to train bulls for emergency search and rescue. "You've got a talent, son. You and that beast." Brant cut him off with a simple shake of his head. Not interested. Instead, he traveled back to a stretch of land many believed had been swallowed by time, long hollow acres. The old ranch hadn't sold in years, too remote and too broken for most to care. But with help from Officer Merrick, now retired and seeking redemption, it was Brant's again. Fences were repaired. Barns were rebuilt. The fields breathed again. Ransom roamed free now. No fences held him, yet he never wandered far from the farmhouse. The townsfolk whispered about it in feed stores and barber shops. Said no animal had ever shown that kind of loyalty. They said the bull had once been a monster, a fighter, a killer. But none of them ever saw him lay his heavy head gently in Brant's lap while the man cleaned his wounds. The two were never apart for long. Brant didn't talk much about the Hollow Range events. When asked by travelers or the occasional journalist who found the story too strange to ignore, he'd offer the same answer each time. Some debts ride heavier than chains. And every evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, he'd walk the fence line with Ransom beside him. One man, one bull, bound by memory, pain, and the long road they had survived together.